Mistress stabbed pregnant wife in rage, but she never expected what the millionaire did next. An echo of thunder rattled the tall windows that night, hinting at the storm of revelations waiting to unfold. Little did anyone know that behind the ornate gates of the Carter estate lurked a jealousy more lethal than lightning. With the city's elite gathered for a lavish soiree, the stage was set for a betrayal so shocking it would unearth carefully guarded secrets and shatter the illusions of a perfect marriage. Hidden in the shadows, one woman's rage was about to descend upon an unsuspecting victim, forging a path of vengeance and heartbreak that no one could have predicted tonight. In the affluent neighborhood of Glendale Heights, the Carter estate stood as a symbol of both opulence and an unattainable dream. Its tall gates, surrounded by perfectly trimmed hedges, beckoned visitors into a world ruled by lavish soirees, polished marble floors, and gleaming chandeliers. For years, James Carter, a millionaire born into generational wealth, maintained an enviable reputation among the city's elite. People whispered about his business acumen, his philanthropic efforts, and the marriage that seemed too perfect to be true. James's wife, Emily Carter, was pregnant with their first child. The news had swept through Glendale Heights like a warm breeze, bringing hopeful smiles to friends and acquaintances who admired the Carters' seemingly unbreakable bond. Emily, a beloved school teacher before her marriage, had put her career on pause to focus on this new phase of her life. She was radiant with maternal pride, her every movement suffused with the quiet excitement of impending motherhood. Standing at James's side, Emily appeared unshakable, her trust in her husband unwavering. Behind the smiles and the show of unity, however, subtle cracks began to form. Emily felt them in fleeting moments. The late-night phone calls James never explained, the visits he made to a new property investment in the city's downtown area, the subtle shift in his demeanor whenever the conversation drifted toward the future. On one hand, James would speak about nursery decorations. On the other, a shadow would cloud his eyes whenever Emily touched on the subject of their baby's name or schooling plans. She tried to rationalize these observations, telling herself that James was just nervous about becoming a father or overwhelmed with his business deals. At the Carters' annual masquerade ball, an event so elaborately organized that it set the city's social calendar, Emily first saw Aria. Beautiful yet understated, Aria didn't command the room with flashy attire or loud conversation. Instead, she exuded a quiet confidence and curiosity that lingered in her gaze. Emily caught Aria looking in James's direction more than once. A normal enough occurrence, she supposed James was, after all, not only wealthy but handsome, with a natural charisma that made him the center of attention. Yet something in Aria's expression was far from friendly admiration. It was as if she was silently claiming possession of the man Emily believed was hers alone. The days passed uneventfully after that fateful ball, but Emily found herself ruminating on Aria's face, the depth of her stare, and the unsettling sense that Aria had intentionally drifted into the Carter orbit. She confided in her oldest friend, Lauren Thompson, a nurse who had known the couple since their college days. Lauren tried to soothe Emily's anxieties, attributing them to pregnancy hormones and the stress of a high society life. But as Emily's suspicions grew more concrete, she felt compelled to act. Late one evening, while James was showering after a long day at work, Emily gathered the courage to scroll through his text messages, a boundary she never thought she would cross. Her heart pounded so violently that she worried the sound might echo through the marble corridors. Despite James's typical caution, he must have made a mistake. A series of texts glowed on the screen from a contact labeled A. They were cryptic and, at first glance, might have been attributed to a business associate talk of meeting times, hush-hush deals, and property mentions. But the tone was not professional. Beneath each exchange ran a current of something personal and intimate that made Emily's hands tremble. James exited the shower, and, in a panic, Emily nearly dropped the phone. Hastily, she put it back where she found it and slipped out of the room before he noticed her presence. Deep down, she already knew that the A in James's phone stood for Aria. That single piece of knowledge was the first fissure in the veneer of Emily's perfect life, one that threatened to shatter everything she believed in. Emily tried to confront James about the messages a week later, but her courage faltered the moment he breezed through the front door, exuding exhaustion and a vague sense of irritation. She watched him in silence, her trembling lips unable to voice the accusations swirling in her mind. She wanted evidence, something more concrete than suspicious texts and a single unsettling impression from the masquerade ball. Yet she felt her baby move inside her, a gentle reminder of the life they'd created together, and a wave of anger at the possibility that James might betray not just her, but their unborn child. Days turned into nights of anxious vigilance. Emily found herself scrolling through social media, scanning event photographs, and even glancing through Glendale Heights gossip columns in search of any mention of Aria. Bits of rumor surfaced, carrying claims that Aria was the daughter of a local real estate magnate who had fallen on hard times. Her name appeared in connection with various charity galas, but it was never accompanied by a clear identity or background. There was talk of her being an interior decorator, a traveling photographer, and even a corporate consultant, none of which Emily could verify. Despite the mismatch of details, it was evident Aria had a way of inserting herself into elite circles with minimal fuss. Emily's once peaceful nights became plagued with nightmares, each dream morphing into a twisted replay of James confessing his love for another woman, or Aria smirking behind a mask, while Emily stood alone in an empty nursery. The stress began to wear on Emily's health. She developed headaches, and her doctor, Felicity Hall, a trusted OB-GYN at Glendale Heights Medical Center, urged her to prioritize her emotional well-being. Stress is dangerous during pregnancy, Dr. Hall reminded Emily gently during a routine checkup. Nothing is worth risking your health or your baby's. Yet the gnawing suspicion only grew, fueled by brief glimpses of James's phone lighting up during dinner, his hurried apologies as he stepped out to take calls, and the mild annoyance he displayed whenever Emily gently probed him about who he was speaking with. Once she caught him on the phone near the estate's garden. He abruptly ended the conversation the moment he saw her. The look on his face shifted between guilt and frustration, leaving Emily even more certain that something was wrong. One afternoon, in a moment of steely resolve, Emily left the house with a clear objective: to find Aria. She drove to an upscale bistro called Lamont's, a known hangout for the city's wealthy. She had overheard James mention it on a phone call earlier that week. Sitting at a corner table, Emily nursed a cup of herbal tea, scanning the room for the woman who had haunted her dreams. Suddenly, there she was, Aria, stepping into Lamont's with effortless elegance. She wore a simple black dress that clung to her figure, her polished demeanor radiating a subtle air of confidence. Strangely, she seemed to be alone. Emily waited, pulse racing, to see if James would appear. Instead, Aria took a seat at the bar and exchanged familiar pleasantries with the bartender, who nodded at something she said before disappearing to fulfill her order. Summoning her courage, Emily approached. "Excuse me," she began, her voice wavering just enough that Aria noticed. "I was wondering if we could talk." Aria glanced at Emily's pregnant belly, then back up to her face, recognition flashing in her eyes. "Of course," Aria replied smoothly, her voice betraying no surprise. "Emily Carter, right?" The fact that Aria already knew her name was a jolt to Emily's system. She wondered if it signaled that Aria had been preparing for this confrontation. Taking a seat beside her, Emily tried to sound calm. "I've seen you at events. I just wanted to introduce myself and maybe ask you about something." "I can't quite place." Arya's lips curled in a slight smile. "I only attend a handful of events, but I recall the Carter Masquerade Ball. You have a beautiful home." That observation, so politely stated, flamed Emily's insecurities. She took a breath, glancing at Arya's manicured hands, the flawless makeup, and the subtle yet unquestionably expensive jewelry. The resentment that had built up within Emily threatened to erupt, but she fought for composure, reminding herself that she needed the truth before she gave in to fury. "You're being so formal," Emily said quietly, "but I have to ask, do you know my husband, James Carter?" The question hung in the air, and time seemed to slow. Arya took a sip of the cocktail placed before her, a practiced movement that gave her a moment to choose her words. "We've crossed paths," she said at last, "strictly in a business context." Emily's instinct screamed that Arya was lying. She saw it in the brief hesitation, the flicker in Arya's eyes. Yet, as if mocking Emily's attempt at confrontation, Arya maintained a front of cordial detachment. Pushing further, Emily pressed, "And that business would be?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Arya's face. "You should ask your husband if you have questions, Mrs. Carter. He would know best how to explain it." Her tone remained polite, yet it carried a note of veiled challenge. The tension between them was unbearable. Emily could feel her heart pounding in her ears, the very air thick with unspoken accusations. Struggling to keep her composure, she quickly apologized and left, unsettled by the encounter. Every fiber of her being wanted to scream at Arya, to accuse her of being the reason James was pulling away. But in that carefully curated social environment, Emily found herself immobilized by the rules of politeness and public decorum. Driving home, she was plagued by questions. Had she just made a fool of herself? If Arya truly was involved in a legitimate business arrangement with James, what right did Emily have to barge in on that conversation? Yet her instincts told her otherwise. She vowed that if Arya was indeed James's mistress, Emily would protect her marriage and unborn child, no matter the cost. Emily's suspicions were confirmed one fateful evening when James claimed he had to work late at the office. Certain that he was lying, Emily decided to follow him. She drove discreetly behind James's car until it stopped at a swanky downtown apartment complex. From a distance, she watched him enter the building. Anxious, she waited in her car until he emerged an hour later with none other than Arya on his arm. He leaned in to whisper something that made her laugh, and a knife of betrayal tore through Emily's chest. Emily wanted to fling open the car door and confront them, but a paralyzing shock and heartbreak kept her rooted to her seat. She felt tears burn her eyes as her husband gently guided Arya to a parked sports car. The moment they disappeared into the night, Emily broke into anguished sobs. Doubt and delusions were no longer possible. Reality had slapped her in the face. Her marriage was not the fairy tale she had believed it to be. She was a wife scorned, pregnant with a child whose father was stepping into another woman's arms. The drive home was a blur of tears, anger, and confusion. That night, Emily could barely sleep. Her mind replayed the image of James and Arya together on an endless loop. The next morning, she confronted James with unwavering resolve. Her voice trembled with fury as she demanded he explain himself. At first, James tried to dodge her accusations, claiming that Arya was an investor in one of his startup projects, someone who required delicate handling because of her family's complicated finances. Emily refused to be placated by corporate jargon or half-baked excuses. "I followed you," she finally admitted, her voice shaking. "I saw you with her. Tell me the truth or pack your bags." James's expression crumbled. He sank onto the couch in the living room, pressing his hands to his face. For a moment, Emily thought she saw genuine remorse in his eyes. He confessed to meeting Arya for business, but admitted that their relationship had grown intimate. "It was a mistake," he insisted. "I got swept up, and she was there, offering support at a time I was overwhelmed with everything: your pregnancy, the expansions, the looming deadlines. I never meant for it to go this far." Shaking with anger, Emily demanded to know if his affair was ongoing. James hesitated, which was all the answer she needed. The betrayal settled over her like a leaden blanket. Everything felt shattered: her trust, her sense of security, the bright future she had imagined for their soon-to-be-born child. James pleaded with Emily to give him time to fix things, but it was painfully clear that he was flailing between guilt for hurting Emily and an undeniable pull toward Arya. Over the next week, Emily oscillated between sobbing rages and moments of cold detachment. She refused to share a bed with James, choosing instead to sleep in the guest room. Feeling isolated, she reached out to her friend Lauren, who arrived at the estate and was horrified by Emily's deteriorating emotional state. Lauren urged James to stay away while she helped Emily pack a small bag. If Emily couldn't find peace under the same roof as her unfaithful husband, then it might be best for her to spend a few days at Lauren's apartment to gather her thoughts. Emily relented, craving a moment of clarity away from the opulent yet suffocating corridors of the Carter home. She tearfully told James she needed space, that she needed to protect herself and their child from the toxicity that his betrayal had unleashed. As Emily settled into Lauren's modest but cozy apartment, she wrestled with the question that plagued her the most. Should she try to salvage her marriage for the sake of her baby, or should she leave James altogether and face life as a single mother? Each day brought fresh waves of doubt. But one thing was certain: Emily was determined to confront Arya directly and make it clear that she would not allow this betrayal to go unnoticed or unpunished. Emily's opportunity came when she returned to the Carter estate to retrieve some personal belongings she'd left behind. The household staff informed her that James had gone out and wouldn't return until late. No sooner had Emily stepped upstairs to the master bedroom than she heard the front door open and close. Expecting one of the maids, she paid it little mind until she heard a woman's voice calling out James's name. Tensing, Emily peered over the railing and saw Arya standing in the foyer, wearing a sleek coat and carrying what looked like an overnight bag. The brazenness of the act stunned Emily. Not only was Arya intruding on her marital home, but she apparently believed she had every right to do so. Fury roiled in Emily's gut. She made her way downstairs, determined to expel the intruder. Arya froze, surprise flickering across her face as Emily approached. "Where is James?" Arya asked, her tone subdued but her posture defensive. A trembling rage took hold of Emily. "He's not here," she answered icily. "But I am, the pregnant wife, the one whose life you've helped ruin." Arya's expression shifted from annoyance to something like pity. "I'm not here to fight," she said softly, "but I do love James, and I won't let you stand in the way of that." Emily's jaw dropped. For a moment, she was rendered speechless by the audacity of the statement. Then her voice erupted in raw fury, echoing off the marble floors. "Stand in the way of it? He's my husband. That child I'm carrying is his child. You're the one who shouldn't even be here." Their argument escalated rapidly. Accusations flew like daggers, each woman blaming the other for the ugly, complicated predicament. Arya insisted that James had promised to leave Emily, that he had fallen out of love with her long before the affair began. Emily, in turn, berated Arya for preying on a vulnerable man who was going through a stressful time, for seducing a married man and undermining a future family's happiness. In the midst of this chaotic exchange, Arya's composure snapped. Her face twisted with anger as she launched into a tirade about how Emily had everything: wealth, social standing, and now a child. Arya had been born into privilege, yes, but her family had lost most of its fortune years ago. She was fighting tooth and nail to keep herself afloat in the world she believed was rightfully hers. James, she argued, was the only person who truly understood her desperation and ambition. Emily shook with hurt and fury. She thought about all the nights she had envisioned the life she and James would build, raising a child, supporting each other's dreams, growing old together. Now, all those hopes lay in tatters. She'd had enough. "Get out," she hissed, pointing toward the door. "Get out of my house and my marriage." Arya's eyes flashed with a savage kind of triumph. "This might be your house for now," she said, "but don't forget James invited me here. He wants me here." Before Emily could respond, Arya turned on her heel and marched toward the door, her heels clicking against the polished floor. That single confrontation felt like a watershed moment, one in which Emily realized that Arya wouldn't just evaporate from their lives. She was deeply entangled with James, and short of legal measures, Emily saw no clear path to remove her. Torn between despair and rage, Emily sank to her knees, letting out a broken sob that echoed through the corridors of the Carter estate. Emily retreated once more to Lauren's apartment, where she spent days locked in internal debates about how to salvage or end her marriage. James called repeatedly, leaving messages that ranged from tearful apologies to angry demands that she return home. At times, Lauren took the phone and warned James to stay away until Emily had made a decision. One afternoon, Emily found an envelope slipped under Lauren's door. Inside was a letter from Arya. The note was brief, but dripping with arrogance. "Emily, I wanted to apologize if my words seemed harsh. The last time we spoke. The truth is that James has grown distant from you, and we're building something that fulfills him in a way you never could. I know how it feels to be desperate, so I extend my sympathy. But remember, no relationship stays the same forever." Emily stared at the letter for a long time, her fingers trembling. That anyone could be so cruel made her stomach churn with nausea and fury. It was as if Arya was taunting her, daring her to admit defeat. Later that evening, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from James. "I'm sorry. Let's talk. Meet me at Glendale Heights Park tomorrow at noon." Her immediate reaction was anger, but a part of her needed closure or at least clarity. She owed it to herself and her unborn child to see if James could be honest. The next day, Emily arrived at the park. She spotted James sitting on a bench near the lake, staring at the water with a troubled expression. For a brief moment, she remembered the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had once brought her to this exact spot to propose under the glow of fairy lights. Now, the distance between them felt immeasurable. Without preamble, Emily approached. "What do you want?" she asked, refusing to soften her tone. James turned, and she saw that he looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. "I want to fix this," he began. "I want my child to grow up with two parents who love them. I know I made a mistake, a huge mistake, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Emily's anger flared. "You're willing to do whatever it takes? How about ending your relationship with Arya?" James hesitated, his silence speaking volumes. The wind rustled the autumn leaves around them, filling the emptiness of that pause with nature's whispered accusations. Finally, he said, "I don't know if I can just let her go. I'm conflicted." Emily could almost hear her heart splinter. "You're choosing to be conflicted over your wife and child? You're actually debating whether you should leave the woman you had an affair with." James raked a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "It's not that simple, Emily. You have everything. Arya doesn't. She's—" Emily interrupted him, voice trembling with disbelief. "Are you hearing yourself? You're prioritizing your mistress's emotional needs over your pregnant wife's well-being." He reached for her, but she pulled back. Tears stung her eyes, and she hated him for making her feel so powerless. "I'm done," she managed to choke out. "If you can't choose us, then I'll make the choice for you." She turned on her heel and left, ignoring his calls for her to wait. She felt that any moment she lingered would only deepen the pain. Despite her brave words, that night was one of the hardest of Emily's life. She collapsed into sobs, comforted only by Lauren's unwavering support. What haunted her most was the sense of looming danger. Aria's note echoed in her mind, a grim reminder that Aria was not content to remain quietly in the background. There was a predatory edge to her actions, a vibe that suggested she would do anything, absolutely anything, to secure James for herself. About a week later, a surprising visitor knocked on Lauren's apartment door. Detective Howard Bennett, wearing a worn trench coat and sporting a sympathetic gaze, introduced himself. He mentioned that he was investigating a break-in and vandalism case at the Carter estate. James had reported that someone had broken into Emily's old art studio at the back of the property, smashing several paintings she had created, leaving behind hateful graffiti directed at Emily. Detective Bennett asked Emily if she had any idea who might hold a grudge against her. Stunned, Emily could only think of one name, Aria. However, she lacked proof. "I have an enemy," she admitted, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. "But I can't say for sure it's her. She's involved with my husband." She detailed the affair and Aria's threatening behavior, including the letter. Although Bennett listened patiently, Emily sensed his skepticism. Aria, after all, came from a socially well-connected family. The detective assured Emily that he'd look into the matter, but reminded her that the case hinged on evidence. While the investigation took place, Emily found herself clinging to her last reserves of resolve. With Lauren's help, she filed for a temporary restraining order against Aria, citing the threatening letter and the disturbing vandalism at the estate. Though uncertain if it would be granted, Emily felt a bit of relief, taking proactive steps. A week later, a judge granted the order, mandating that Aria keep her distance from Emily under penalty of legal repercussions. But even this legal measure felt like a band-aid over a wound that was still bleeding. Each day, Emily's pregnancy advanced, bringing her closer to a delivery date she had once viewed as the culmination of her happiest dreams. Now, it felt overshadowed by heartbreak and the constant gnaw of fear that Aria's aggression might escalate. It was around this time that James began to call again, more frequently. Sometimes Emily answered in a moment of weakness, hoping for a miracle. Each conversation ended in tears and frustration. James still professed love for Emily, but refused to cut Aria out of his life completely. As infuriating as it was, Emily almost felt sorry for him. He sounded like a man trapped between guilt and lust, unwilling to do the hard work of choosing a path and dealing with the consequences. In quieter moments, Emily found herself blaming not just Aria but also James for giving Aria the power to destroy their marriage. She vowed that if James couldn't make the right decision, she would. A plan began to form in the back of her mind to leave Glendale Heights altogether, start fresh in another city where she could raise her child without the specter of infidelity looming over her. Yet a lingering part of her still yearned to see if James would come around, if the man she once knew would fight for his family instead of clinging to a doomed affair. One stormy evening, just as the last vestiges of daylight surrendered to night, Emily found herself alone at Lauren's place. Lauren had gone to cover a double shift at the hospital. The wind howled outside, lightning flickering across the apartment's windows. Emily tried to distract herself by browsing online baby items, selecting pastel-colored blankets and nursery furniture that might bring comfort in the uncertain future ahead. Suddenly, a frantic pounding rattled the door. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. She approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. To her horror, she recognized Aria. Her hair and coat were soaked from the rain, her eyes wide with a feverish intensity. Emily's first instinct was to ignore her, pretend she wasn't there. But Arya began shouting, her voice muffled by the door but still clear enough to convey desperation. "Open up, Emily. I need to talk to you. It's about James." Emily's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. Was James hurt? Did Arya have something important to say? She hesitated, acutely aware of the restraining order, but concern for James overrode her caution. She opened the door a crack, bracing her foot against it in case Arya tried to force her way in. "What do you want?" she demanded, struggling to keep her voice steady. Arya's eyes flickered to the door chain. "James is in trouble," she claimed breathlessly. "He got into a car accident, and he's asking for you. He won't talk to me." Emily's heart lurched. She pictured James lying in a hospital bed, calling her name in pain. Despite the anger she felt, the bond they shared was not so easily severed. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice trembling. That split second of distraction was all Arya needed. She shoved the door with surprising strength, dislodging the chain and knocking Emily backward. Startled and off balance, Emily fell to the floor. Arya charged inside, slamming the door behind her. Before Emily could get up, Arya was standing over her, eyes blazing with malevolent intent. "You stupid, spoiled brat!" Arya hissed, her voice shaking. "You think you can hide behind a piece of paper and keep James away from me?" Emily's voice caught in her throat. She tried to crawl backward, but Arya lunged. "I said, stay away!" Emily screamed, reaching for her phone to call for help. Arya snatched the phone, flinging it across the room where it shattered against the wall. Fury contorted Arya's features. "He's mine," she spat. "I don't care about your baby, your marriage, or your threats. Do you think that restraining order would keep me from taking what's mine?" Emily tried to calm her, but Arya was beyond reason. "You destroyed his love for me by getting pregnant," Arya continued, her voice cracking with an irrational edge. "You're the one who manipulated him, trapping him with this child." A surge of protectiveness flared in Emily, overshadowing her fear. "I didn't manipulate him," she snapped. "We were married. We wanted this baby together." Arya let out a bitter laugh. "He doesn't want it anymore." Her hand slid inside her coat. Before Emily realized what was happening, Arya pulled out a small knife, its blade gleaming in the flickering light. Emily felt her stomach twist in terror. She tried to scramble to her feet, but Arya moved with a sudden burst of violence. She swung the knife toward Emily, who instinctively raised her arm to protect her belly. A searing pain tore through Emily's arm. Gasping, she watched blood trickle down her sleeve. Summoning adrenaline-fueled strength, Emily kicked at Arya, momentarily throwing her off balance. Arya stumbled, and Emily tried to rush for the door. But Arya recovered faster than Emily expected, grabbing her by the hair and yanking her back. Emily shrieked, the sound echoing in the small apartment. "You should have stayed away!" Arya screamed, bringing the knife down again. This time, Emily twisted her body to shield her pregnant belly, taking the blow to her side. Agony radiated through her. She felt warm blood pooling, staining her clothes. Dazed and in shock, Emily collapsed to her knees, instinct screaming for her to protect her unborn child at all costs. In the background, Emily heard voices shouting from the hallway. Neighbors had heard the commotion, and someone banged on the door. "Is everything okay in there?" a muffled voice called. The door burst open under a neighbor's force, just as Arya raised the knife once more. Panicking, Arya turned and fled through another exit, a small balcony door that opened onto a narrow fire escape. As the neighbors rushed in to help, Emily clutched her belly, tears streaming down her face. She felt the baby move faintly, a relief so profound that she broke into a sob, even as pain flared mercilessly. Blood stained the floor around her, and darkness threatened to close in. Someone called an ambulance, and sirens soon pierced the night. Emily held on to consciousness with every ounce of willpower, silently begging her unborn child to stay strong. When Emily next opened her eyes, she found herself in a hospital bed, hooked to the fourth. Lauren sat beside her, clasping her hand. A surge of gratitude washed over Emily at the sight of her friend's worried but comforting presence. Dr. Felicity Hall entered, her gentle face marred by concern. "You're lucky," she said softly. "The wounds are serious, but you and the baby are stable. We had to give you a transfusion. You'll need time to heal, physically and emotionally." Emily nodded weakly, tears of relief gathering in her eyes. I was so scared," she whispered, voice shaking. She glanced down at her bandaged side and arm, wincing at the memory of Arya's blade tearing through her flesh. A uniformed police officer, accompanied by Detective Bennett, appeared at the doorway. Detective Bennett's normally stern face was suffused with sympathy as he took in Emily's condition. "Miss S. Carter," he began, "we've issued a warrant for Arya's arrest. Your neighbor's statements corroborate your account. We'll find her. Where is James?" The question slipped from Emily's lips before she realized she'd asked it. Lauren squeezed her hand, as if apologizing. Detective Bennett cleared his throat. "He's on his way here. We spoke to him. He was distraught when he heard what happened. Part of Emily wanted to see James, needed the comfort of the man she had once loved so deeply. Another part felt a cold fury at his role in enabling Arya's presence in their lives. If he had cut Arya off earlier, would they be in this situation now? A few hours later, James walked into the hospital room. He looked drawn and haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. Guilt hung over him like a storm cloud. Emily refused to meet his gaze at first. Instead, she stared at the sterile white walls, replaying the harrowing events in her mind. "I'm so sorry," James croaked, his voice heavy. "I never thought Arya would do something like this." Emily swallowed hard, her voice trembling with a mixture of pain and anger. "But she did. Because of you, James. Because you couldn't let her go." He fell to his knees beside the hospital bed, tears brimming in his eyes. "I know I've made terrible mistakes. I swear I had no idea she was capable of violence. I was going to end it with her. She wouldn't. She wouldn't accept it." Emily closed her eyes, feeling drained beyond measure. "I don't know how to trust you anymore. She tried to kill me, James. She tried to kill our baby." He bowed his head. "I'll do anything," he murmured, voice cracking. "Anything to make this right." But the damage was done. Emily felt a profound emptiness, an unbearable weight of betrayal, fear, and heartbreak. She knew she wasn't ready to forgive. The stabbing had ripped open not just her body, but the illusions she had harbored about her marriage. As James hunched over in remorse, Emily felt only a hollow ache, uncertain if time or love could ever mend what was now broken. Arya was apprehended 2 days later at a motel just outside Glendale Heights. The story of the millionaire's pregnant wife stabbed by the mistress spread through local media like wildfire. Gossip columns feasted on every salacious detail, painting Arya as an unhinged gold digger who targeted James Carter for his wealth and influence. Overnight, Arya's social standing disintegrated. Her old acquaintances, upon hearing the news, distanced themselves in record time. Detective Bennett led the investigation with a thoroughness that bordered on relentless, determined to compile airtight evidence against Arya. Security footage from Lauren's apartment complex corroborated witness accounts. Additionally, the judge had already granted Emily a restraining order. Arya had violated it in the most violent way possible, cementing the severity of her crime. Charges against Arya ranged from aggravated assault to attempted murder. Meanwhile, James tried desperately to reconcile with Emily, making daily visits to the hospital until she was discharged. He offered to hire the best private security to protect her. He suggested therapy sessions, tearfully insisting that he realized now what he stood to lose. Yet, Each time Emily saw him, she was reminded of the depth of his betrayal. While she appreciated his sudden concern, the emotional wounds ran too deep to be soothed by belated guilt. The day Emily left the hospital, an unexpected development arose. Aria claimed in a statement to the police that she was pregnant, too allegedly with James's child. Word spread like wildfire, fueling speculation and scandal across Glendale Heights. Overnight, the narrative shifted. Tabloids salivated over the possibility of dueling pregnant women, each carrying the child of a wealthy millionaire. Aria's accusations were deemed questionable, especially given her mental instability, but the claim alone was enough to stir up drama. Shaken, Emily confronted James about the possibility that Aria might be telling the truth. He looked equally troubled, swearing that he had always been careful with Aria, that he didn't believe she was pregnant. But the seeds of doubt were planted. The thought that Emily might share a child with a sibling born out of this violent, toxic affair was almost too much to bear. Even Lauren, who despised James for his role in the entire tragedy, advised Emily to confirm or refute Aria's claim. "You need to know," she said gently, "for your own peace of mind." Emily agreed, and James volunteered to arrange for a paternity test if Aria would consent. In the meantime, Emily tried to stay focused on her own recovery, attending prenatal checkups where Dr. Hall reassured her that, though her injuries were serious, her baby remained healthy and strong. As the trial date loomed for Aria, Emily found herself in a swirl of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to see Aria locked away for good, ensuring her child would be safe from further harm. Another part remained haunted by pity for a woman so consumed by desperation and obsession that she had thrown her life away. Worst of all, a quiet corner of Emily's mind acknowledged the role James played in fueling the entire catastrophe. If he had been honest, if he had ended his affair before it escalated, none of this might have happened. The day of Aria's preliminary hearing arrived with the usual media frenzy. Photographers lined the courthouse steps, eager to capture shots of the pregnant victim, the accused mistress, and the millionaire husband caught in the crossfire. Emily, wearing a long-sleeved blouse to hide her healing wounds, walked into the courtroom flanked by Lauren and a private security guard James had insisted on hiring. Aria entered in handcuffs, her once glamorous demeanor replaced by hollow cheeks and a hardened glare. She did not look pregnant, but the mere possibility hung in the air like a dark cloud. She locked eyes with Emily, an undercurrent of hatred seething beneath her surface composure. During the hearing, the prosecution presented their evidence, highlighting Aria's repeated violations of boundaries, her threatening letter, and the brutal attack at Lauren's apartment. Aria's defense attorney tried to paint her as a woman driven to emotional extremes by James's manipulation, claiming he had made grand promises of divorce and a new life, only to renege when Emily's pregnancy complicated matters. The defense further alleged that Emily had provoked Aria, cornering her into a state of violent desperation. The turning point came when Detective Bennett took the stand, meticulously detailing how the crime scene evidence contradicted Aria's claims of self-defense. Neighbors testified to hearing Emily scream for help, describing the violent break-in. The judge ruled in favor of proceeding to trial, and Aria was remanded to custody without bail, given the severity of the charges. Outside the courtroom, Emily felt torn between relief and fear, knowing a lengthy trial lay ahead. She found no comfort in James's company, who lingered near her like a shamed dog. The final blow of the day came when Aria's lawyer leaked a document to the press, a purported sonogram that Aria claimed was hers, fueling even more speculation about her alleged pregnancy. James and Emily retreated from the ensuing chaos, heading straight home to the Carter estate for a tense discussion. Sitting in the drawing room of the Carter estate, James looked more fragile than Emily had ever seen him. "Gone," was the confident entrepreneur used to commanding boardrooms and social galas. In his place sat a man haunted by guilt, fear, and regret. Emily, still too weak for extended confrontations, sat quietly, waiting for him to speak. "You deserve better than this," James finally said, his voice low. "I can't undo what happened, but I want to take responsibility. I need to protect you and our child, financially, physically, and emotionally." She studied him, uncertain. "What are you saying?" James inhaled shakily. "I've spoken with my attorneys. I'm going to file for divorce. From you." Emily's eyes widened in shock, her heart pounding at the perceived betrayal. He quickly raised a hand, as though to stop her from reacting. "Not because I want to be with Arya," he clarified, "but because I've caused you enough pain, and I'm not sure I can ever regain your trust. I think you and the baby deserve a fresh start, free from my mistakes." Emily stared, her emotions a riot of betrayal, relief, and heartbreak. She didn't know how to respond. For months, she had demanded that James choose her unequivocally. Now he seemed to be doing the opposite, severing ties in a gesture that might be interpreted as noble or as cowardly, depending on one's perspective. He continued, voice trembling, "I'm transferring a substantial portion of my assets into a trust for you and the baby. You'll never have to worry about money. I know it's not enough to atone for what I've done, but it's a start. I don't expect you to forgive me or ever want me back. I just want you safe." Tears slid down Emily's cheeks. She had fantasized about leaving, about building a new life elsewhere. Yet the finality of it all, James handing her a divorce and effectively admitting he'd lost the right to be her husband, hit her harder than she had anticipated. A swirl of questions crowded her mind. Was this truly the best path forward, or was it another impulsive decision fueled by guilt? "I never wanted your money," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I wanted your love, your loyalty." He nodded, gaze downcast. "I know, and I failed you in the worst way. Maybe someday we can find a different path. But right now, this is what I can do." In that moment, Emily felt both heartbreak and an odd sense of release. This was not the fairy tale ending she had envisioned, nor was it an easy resolution. But perhaps it was a necessary one. The illusions that once bound them had shattered. Acceptance, no matter how painful, was the only way forward. While the divorce proceedings began, Arya's criminal trial loomed. Tension simmered throughout Glendale Heights. Emily found herself in a limbo of uncertainty, focusing on her physical recovery and planning for life after the final gavel struck on her marriage. She had begun searching for a new home in another part of the state, somewhere far from the memories haunting her in Glendale Heights. About 2 weeks before the trial was set to start, shocking news rippled through the local media. Arya had lost the baby she claimed to be carrying. Speculation soared. Had she ever truly been pregnant, or had she concocted the story as a desperate ploy for sympathy? Emily felt a mix of horror and grim relief. If Arya had truly been pregnant, the loss, no matter how manipulative she had been, was tragic. If the pregnancy had been a lie, it only confirmed the level of deceit Arya was capable of. Either way, the news dealt a serious blow to Arya's credibility. In pre-trial hearings, the prosecution hammered home the point that Arya's claim had never been substantiated with legitimate medical records. Her sonogram appeared to be from a friend who was genuinely pregnant, a fact discovered when that friend came forward. On the day of the trial, Emily took the stand, her heart in her throat. She recounted the terrifying moments of the stabbing, describing how Arya had broken into Lauren's apartment under the pretense of bringing dire news about James. The courtroom fell silent, all eyes on Emily as she described the blade's cold glint, the burning pain of the stab wounds, and the sheer terror for her unborn child. Arya sat, expression vacant. She offered no outbursts, no angry rebuttals. Her defense team tried to paint Emily as a scorned wife who had exaggerated the violence. But the physical evidence, Emily's injuries, the broken door chain, the neighbor's testimony corroborated her account. It didn't take the jury long to return a guilty verdict on charges of aggravated assault and attempted murder. As the bailiff led Arya away, Emily felt a fleeting twinge of pity. Arya's eyes burned with hatred, but beneath that, there was a flicker of fear. For a moment, Emily wondered if, under different circumstances, Arya might have sought help for her obsessive, destructive behaviors. But it was too late. Consequences had caught up with her. With Arya sentenced to a lengthy prison term, Emily found herself facing an uncertain but more peaceful future. The baby's arrival was imminent, and she poured her energy into preparing for motherhood. She invested in a small suburban home in Fairview, a few hours' drive from Glendale Heights. It lacked the grandeur of the Carter estate, but its cozy warmth felt far more comforting than any mansion. James followed through on his promise, finalizing the divorce and setting up a trust for Emily and the baby. The settlement was generous, but Emily accepted it more out of practicality than a desire for luxury. She wanted her child to have financial stability, free from the burdens James's affair had thrust upon them. On a crisp winter morning, Emily went into labor. Lauren was by her side the entire time. After hours of intense contractions, Emily gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Exhausted yet filled with overwhelming love, she held her son against her chest, tears streaking her cheeks. In that moment, every tragedy she'd endured felt distant, overshadowed by the miracle of new life. She named him Ethan James Carter, honoring the father whose choices had broken her heart, but whose blood ran through their child's veins. News of Ethan's birth reached James quickly. He showed up at the hospital, hesitant, fear mingling with hope in his eyes. Emily allowed him in, albeit cautiously. The sight of James cradling Ethan in his arms proved both tender and heartbreaking. For a fleeting moment, they shared an unspoken bond-love for the tiny life they had created. Yet the wounds remained, unhealed. The divorce papers were signed, their paths diverged irrevocably. Before James left the hospital room, he gently kissed Ethan's forehead. Turning to Emily, he spoke softly, "Thank you, he's perfect." Emily managed a small smile, tears blurring her vision. They had come full circle, in a sense. Once lovers, now near strangers, bonded only by the innocent child in their midst. No matter how fractured their relationship might be, Ethan deserved to know his father provided. James upheld his duties responsibly. Weeks turned into months, and Emily adjusted to her new life as a single mother. She found joy in every milestone of Ethan's growth, from his first gummy smiles to his initial attempts at rolling over. In these fleeting moments, the traumatic memories of Arya's attack and James's betrayal felt like a distant storm. The scars on her body reminded her of the darkness she had survived, but each smile from Ethan offered a ray of hope. James visited occasionally, always respectful of Emily's boundaries. Their interactions remained polite, tinged with the sadness of what might have been. Sometimes, Emily caught a glimpse of regret in James's eyes, as though he recognized the enormity of his loss. He never pressed for reconciliation, perhaps understanding that too much had transpired between them. Arya's case faded from the headlines. She would spend a large chunk of her life in prison, haunted by the choices she had made. The Carter name retained some of its old luster in Glendale Heights, but the scandal had left an indelible mark. Emily's acquaintances in the social circle still gossiped about the affair and the attack, yet as time went on, the city found new scandals to fixate upon. Slowly, Emily built a small community for herself and Ethan. She reconnected with former colleagues from her teaching days and even considered going back to work part-time, aiming to carve out a future driven not by wealth or prestige, but by her own sense of purpose. Occasionally she wondered if she could ever love again. The possibility both intrigued and terrified her. On a peaceful summer evening, Emily found herself rocking Ethan to sleep in the nursery. She had lovingly decorated with soft pastels and gentle lullabies. As she gazed at her son, she whispered a silent vow to protect him from the chaos that had once threatened his life. She had learned a painful lesson that illusions, even grand ones, can shatter in an instant, yet from the shards one could still forge a new path, built on truth rather than make-believe. In the end, Emily realized that the greatest wealth she could ever possess was not James's fortune or social status. It was the wisdom she had earned through heartbreak, the love she shared with her child, and the ability to move forward, determined never again to let another person's say it define her worth. Real trials don't always end with clean breaks, but Emily's journey reminds us that survival and growth can emerge from unimaginable pain. She made the agonizing choice to stand on her own, refusing to let betrayal define her or endanger her unborn child. While James was forever marked by the consequences of his affair, and Arya paid a steep price for her violent obsession, Emily found strength in embracing her new reality. She learned that true security doesn't come from wealth or status. It comes from self-respect, courage, and an unshakable resolve to protect what matters most. If this story has gripped your emotions and kept you on the edge of your seat, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Help others discover the powerful lessons hidden within Emily's tale of heartbreak and resilience. Until next time, stay strong in the face of life's storms and cherish those who stand by you when the thunder rolls.